Hey guys, I am here to talk to you guys a little bit about compare problems. This is something new that we have not done in math yet. So remember when we talked about adding and subtracting with double digit and triple digit numbers, we always like to start with something physical or a model, something that we can hold and touch and see, because that's how we really learn and understand what we're doing in problems. So the first thing I want to show you guys down here on my table, I have just some little Unifix cubes. Okay, so I want to show you these type of problems with these tools first so that it really makes sense to you what we're doing. So we're going to be comparing two different amounts. Okay, so let's say that you were playing a game with a friend and maybe you roll a dice and the first friend rolls the number 6. So I have 6 cubes here and I've lined them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so the first friend's train has 6 cubes in it. The second friend rolls their dice and let's say they got the number 4. I'm going to put 4 blue cubes here. Okay, so the question that I want you to answer is how many more cubes does the red friend have than the blue friend? Okay, it's not saying how many do they have altogether. That's not what this problem's asking. This problem is asking us to compare these two numbers and find the difference between them. What is different between these two numbers? Okay, so a really good strategy is to line up my cubes like this. I'm going to match them up. Okay, so this is what happens when I've lined up my cubes. You can see really clearly how many more cubes the red train has in it. The red train has 2 more cubes. We could also say the blue train has 2 fewer cubes or 2 less cubes than the red train. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's look at this. Let's do another problem. Let's pretend that we rolled the dice again, but this time we rolled 2 dice. So the friend who is using the red cubes rolled a 6 and a 4, which we know makes 10. Okay, so here are 10 cubes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this friend has 10 cubes. Then the blue friend rolls their dice and they get 3 and 4, which we know makes 7. So we're going to put their 7 cubes. We're going to line them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, we're going to line those up, match them up. So the question is, how many more cubes does the red train have than the blue train? Okay, so once we've lined these up, we can see right here is where they were at a tie, right? This is where they would have each had 7. But we know the red train has 10. So how many more cubes does the red train have than the blue train? Yes, it has 3 more cubes. So the red train has 3 more than the blue train. Okay? So that's looking at the problems with an actual physical model. We are comparing the two numbers. So now we're going to look at some, and we're going to look at those with the dry erase board, okay? Because we're not always going to have Unifix cubes to help us solve the problems. Sometimes we are going to need to just have paper and pencil and solve these type of problems. So on here, we are comparing what two different people have. So I'm going to teach you some really cool tricks that will help you when you're trying to solve these problems, okay? So let's say this is our problem. Sarah she's making necklaces and she has 12 beads. So I'm going to put an S for Sarah. And I'm going to put a little dash and I'm going to put 12. So I know Sarah has 12 beads. And I'm going to also tell you that Melissa I'm going to put an M for Melissa. Melissa has 7 beads. I want to know how many more beads Sarah has than Melissa. Okay, so I'm looking here. This is telling me Sarah has 12, Melissa has 7. If I asked you who had more, you would be able to tell me right away, well, Sarah has more than Melissa does. We want to know how many more. How much bigger is 12 than 7? We have to find the difference between these two numbers. So I'm going to teach you a couple of really cool strategies that you can try to solve these, okay? So for Sarah, I'm going to draw 12 little dots. I'm going to double check to make sure I drew the right amount of dots, because if not, I could make a mistake. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. And then I know Melissa has 7. Now remember when I lined up my trains, I matched them up. I'm going to do the same thing when I draw my dots now for Melissa. So I'm going to draw 7 dots under here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this top row shows me how many beads Sarah has. She has 12. And the bottom row shows me how many Melissa had. Do you see how I lined them up? So I can look right away and see this is where they would have been tied, right? This is where Sarah and Melissa's beads would have been tied, but Sarah has this many more than Melissa. So how many more does she have? Well, I can just count these and find out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I would say Sarah has 5 more beads than Melissa. Another thing you can do is the way to find the answer would be to say 12 minus 7 equals 5. Okay? So when we're trying to find the difference, we can also subtract and we can find how many more beads Sarah had than Melissa had. 12 is 5 bigger than 7. So we're comparing those two numbers. Let's try another one. Okay. Let's say Ben had 14 Pokemon cards. Ben had 14 Pokemon cards. And we'll say Jimmy had 9 Pokemon cards. Okay? So Ben had 14, Jimmy has 9. I want to know how many more Pokemon cards Ben has than Jimmy. So I'm not saying how many Pokemon cards do they have altogether. That's not what this problem is asking. This problem is asking us to compare the amount of cards that Ben has to the amount of cards that Jimmy has. So there's a couple different things I can do. One thing I can do is I can draw 14 dots. And these are the cards that Ben has. Let's make sure we drew 14. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Those are Ben's cards. And I know Jimmy has 9, so I'm going to draw 9 of them under here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? So this is where Ben and Jimmy would have been tied. But Ben has this many more than Jimmy does. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oops, we ended up with the same number for this one too, but that's okay. It just happened to work out that way. So we've got 14 minus 9 equals 5. So we know the difference between those two numbers is 5. Ben has 5 more Pokemon cards than Jimmy, or we could say Jimmy has 5 fewer Pokemon cards than Ben, or Jimmy has 5 less Pokemon cards than Ben. Okay? Let's look at another one. We'll look at one more for this one. And then I want you to try to make up some of these on your own. Keep your amounts that you're working with under 20. So don't let either person have more than 20 when you're trying to compare for now. Okay, we want to keep our numbers kind of small so we really understand what we're doing. All right, so let's say Jackie we'll say she had 10 cookies, okay? And we'll say Betty had 5 cookies. So we want to know how many more cookies does Jackie have than Betty? So we're comparing the numbers 10 and 5. Now, some of you are going to look at this already and you're going to be able to tell me that Betty has 5 less cookies than Jackie, or Jackie has 5 more than Betty. But if that's tricky still, then draw your dots. Draw what Jackie has. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now we're going to draw what Betty has. 2, 3, 4, 5. And do you see how I carefully line them up underneath? This is where that tie would have happened. That's where Jackie and Betty would have been tied. But Jackie has this many more than Betty. Oh my goodness, it ended up the same number again. 10 minus 5 equals 5. Okay, I'll do one more and I'll make sure the answer is not 5 this time. Okay, let's see. So let's do Pete had 10 rocks in his pocket. So Pete, this P stands for Pete, he has 10 rocks in his pocket. And we'll say John had 7 rocks in his pocket. I want to know how many more rocks does Pete have than John? So we need to compare these two numbers. So I'm going to draw 10 rocks. Or 10 dots to represent the rocks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Mathematicians always double check their work so they're precise and accurate. And now I'm going to draw John's rocks. And when I draw these, I'm going to make sure I line them up really carefully underneath of here. So John has 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? This is where Pete and John would have been tied. But we know that Pete has 10 and John only had 7. So this shows us how many more Pete had than John. Pete has 3 more rocks than John. Okay, now down here, I could also just take the bigger number, 10, subtract the smaller number, and that will also find the difference between these two numbers. What is different between them? What's the amount that's of the difference, okay? So hopefully this will help you, and I will do another video soon to help you with some of the other compare problems that you'll need to be able to solve as mathematicians, okay? All right, friends, see you soon.